Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. The Turkish TB2 drone, something that has been making headlines for a little while now. It was talked about after the Armenian and Azerbaijan conflict, and I have with me Lieutenant General Shokin Chauhan, who had taken us through a whole session with regards to drone warfare and its potential within armed conflict, kinetic situations and gray zone operations and so on and so forth. The Ukraine war has brought about some very, very interesting aspects. Sir, thank you so much. The Turkish TB2 has been in question quite a bit, apart from the generic drone warfare and its use in kinetic operations.
That's right. Very interesting, actually, how something that people were talking about on the defense, or in the way the Azerbaijan had fought the war with Armenia and how they had destroyed the Armenian armed forces. Keeping that in mind, Ukraine had contacted Turkey in last year, that's 2020, and they had taken the rights to manufacture the Turkish drones, the TB2, with the transfer of technology in 2020. And from what I've been told, Turkey had, they had been able to manufacture and import almost 24 to 26 such drones. And each drone, as you're aware, costs about $10 million. So it's an expensive piece of equipment. But somehow beyond the first couple of days of the war, I didn't really see the drones operating anywhere. So it's a question we must ask ourselves. Is the TB2 actually a game changer? Or it was an enhancement of technology that functioned in a different environment?
Indeed, that's a big question, sir. I mean, to begin with, this was a high-intensity combat situation. The Azerbaijan-Armenian war became high-intensity for a very short period of time. How do you look at both of these and compare the usage of this drone, sir?
In the Armenian war, in the Azerbaijan-Armenian war, the Armenians had conventional armor and they used their conventional forces, but they didn't have the capability of what I would call multi-layered air defense. Something that the Russians have. The Russians are masters at air defense, absolute masters. And their S-400, which has been created, which we have recently bought, India has recently bought, is a game changer in air defense. Its ability to spot a target from 75 kilometers to 500 kilometers is a huge advantage. And that itself is a game changer in using the S-400 radars and using the other air defense systems that the Russians have. It was just a matter of time that the TB2 would disappear out of the skies. That's the main lesson that we have taken back, actually, from seeing this war, is that when you're looking at air defense and when you're looking at a high-intensity, high-technology army like the Russian army, you have to consider the fact that they have all the modern weapons. They have all the capabilities of, facing and beating down any kind of technological equipment, because Russians are prepared for this kind of environment. And let me just tell you a little bit about the multi-layers of air defense, so that it makes it clear. For example, in the Indian case, we bought the S-400. It'll sort of put it in perspective. The S-400 tracks and can deal with up to 20 to 30 targets at one time between 75 kilometers to 500 kilometers. So any target in this area is lit up in the S-400 radar. For targets below 75 kilometers, you have handheld air defense systems like the Javelin, or in our case, the SAM-7s. You have the missiles, the OSI AKs. You have a number of weapon systems that can track and that can hit targets from 0 to 75. The SAM-7 is actually 0 to 25. Anybody coming within 0 to 25 kilometers, the SAM-7 will take off. Beyond that is the OSI-8Ks and the other missile system that India has. So now with the S-400, we have the ability to take on targets from say 10 kilometers to 500 plus kilometers. So creating a system by which we will be able to secure our skies. Ukraine doesn't have this kind of system. They depended on the fact that they thought that they would use the TB2 against the Russians and be able to dent the Russian armor. But it was a matter of time when the Russians just knocked the system out of the sky. And from what I've been told, almost 14 to 15 TB2s have been destroyed. The rest have been withdrawn by the Ukrainians because they are aware that this kind of system simply cannot function.
That is true. So a lot of the Ukrainian Air Force is, withdrawn towards the western part of Ukraine, areas where the war is not affected that much. One thing when you notice within the Russian invasion and the tactics that they had used, they had gone in these long armor columns and stuff like that. And the Ukrainians used a tactic of actually small battalions or small units of men going and hitting them with, as you were talking about, shoulder fired and man pads and javelins and so on and so forth. And they were, hitting the head and they were hitting the tail and some armor in the middle and stuff like that. A lot of this damage was caused by units on the ground and not the TB2 as it's been portrayed. So the success ratio of this particular drone, when it was in combat, how would you look at it, sir?
I don't think the drones had a success ratio at all. There was an attempt by the NATO countries to try and portray that the drones had indeed created mayhem in the Russian armor in the beginning days of the war. But this quickly disappeared. If you notice, Aadi, the narrative that the TB2 was effective against the Russian armor disappeared within the first 3 to 4, 5 days.
Yeah.
After that, you no longer had those images of a drone hitting a tank. But I think they took either the images of the Armenian war or some exercise that they may have carried out with the drones, because they couldn't get this narrative going. In India, too, we have these small teams, hunter-killer teams, which carry the anti-tank, missiles, and we go around in search of tank columns that can come in. Now, where are the tank columns most vulnerable, Adi? When a tank column is either on a road. Now, why were the Russian tank columns on the road? I've been a Strike Force commander, Strike Corps commander. I would never keep my tank columns in the tank. But if you notice, it was the winter, and the winter was thawing into early spring. And during this spring thaw, the roads around the Ukrainian countryside and indeed the Russian countryside become muddy and soggy, making it difficult for the armor to be operating outside the main roads. So that made them vulnerable because armor has to be spread across on a very wide front. There should be, when armor is moving, up to 500 meters per tank. The distance between from a tank to tank distance should be 500 to 800 meters sometimes. And then to line up an armor column or any kind of column on a main road makes you very vulnerable to these small teams carrying anti-tank missiles with them. Or even the Ukrainian Air Force, if they could have operated, but the Ukrainian Air Force disappeared very quickly. So Russians definitely made a mistake in sort of not looking at this particular important aspect of whether they could operate off the road, and made themselves vulnerable. And the second thing is, if you enter a dense countryside and if you enter a town or a city, you are bound to you are very vulnerable. An armor coming inside a dense situation is very vulnerable. The Israelis have beaten it by developing for their Merkava an Iron Dome, an ability of the Merkava to take on threats from 360 degrees, even at a short range. That Merkava has the ability to react to short range hunter killer missile systems also, which the Russians didn't have. So that seems to be the issue. That seems to be the issue why they were bogged down. I think they took it for granted that the Ukrainians would just sort of fall down or give up. Uh, they probably didn't expect the Ukrainians to fight back in the manner that they fought back.
Indeed, so the Ukrainian military tactics are being studied even today. As a matter of fact, the Chinese are looking at it very carefully. So that is an interesting point of view that you've put across. So the TAB2 one, a lot of people have spoken about its strengths. I'd like to go about talking about, because every system has its vulnerabilities as well. Even the best fighter aircraft in the world today, whoever might have made it, everybody has his own opinion and own facts, would have certain vulnerabilities. What in your mind has been brought out as the major vulnerabilities for this type of an unmanned aerial vehicles?
So I'm here. I was reading an article and looking at a couple of situations where the TB2 was actually targeted by the Russians. Firstly, the drone itself is not a fast-moving object. It moves between 200 to 250 to 300 kilometers per hour. Secondly, the TB2's legs stick down. Unlike aircraft, when you're traveling by air, you find that the undercarriage lifts up and the wheels go inside. The TB2, in order to cut the costs, the wheels stick down or the legs stick down. And an object like this actually lights up a radar which is looking for it. So the Russian radars, which are fabulous pieces of electronic equipment, especially when you see the S400 radars, this kind of TAB2 equipment in the sky literally lit up, and they could use their various layers to target the TAB2 and blow it out of the skies. So that's the greatest greatest vulnerability of the TAB2. Firstly, it's extremely slow. Secondly, it has a very large radar signature. And in today's electronic battlefield, having a radar signature really cuts your survivability on the battlefield to less than 10%. You simply cannot survive a multi-layered air defense system by the kind of abilities that the TAB2 has.
Indeed, sir, and that's one of the reasons I believe is that long column, which was there, almost 40-mile long column, did not get attacked by the Ukrainians. And even today in the eastern Ukraine, there are reports of a 10-mile long, armor column entering into Luhansk and all those areas. It's interesting to put that across that in spite of the so-called capabilities of the drones and stuff like that, only the manned systems were able to approach that longer column and probably do very minimal damage. They could not kind of, open out and do it. What does that tell you about the Russian, air defense system? I'm going to come back to that, which they had deployed over this particular column, which was entering into Kiev.
So, like I said, Adi, the Russians are masters at air defense, absolute masters. And if you know the Russian army, they have a separate air defense command. It's separate from the rest of the armed forces. It is, the army commander or the air defense commander reports directly to the president of the Russia. So, with this kind of ability and the air defense capability, the Russians had been able to employ complete air cover over their forces. So, the ability of these drones or any kind of air force to sneak inside this multi-layered air defense seemed impossible. What really succeeded were the javelins, that the Americans has been sending the Ukrainian forces. The javelins are very easy to deploy, very easy to fire, and in fact, the Ukrainian forces Adi were barely trained for using the javelin. In fact, they will give some of the when you read also, because the Ukraine has been getting these javelins during the battle itself. So they've barely been trained, barely been allowed to fire even a single javelin missile. But but because it's so easy, if you aim, you point this thing and you fire, the Ukrainians have been using it to good effect.
Indeed, yes.
And have blunted many Russian, small teams of Russian tanks which may have moved into the built-up areas. So a very interesting battle that, the questions that it throws up is that Russians expected Ukraine to fold up very quickly. That didn't happen. But at the same time, the Russians may have used less force, may have not used their air force, may have not used their artillery firepower, because what the Russians actually do, if they were fighting an enemy that they would first use their firepower, their artillery, their air force to completely destroy and soften enemy defense, especially where they had the kind of asymmetry in the air. But they didn't expect this fight back by the Ukrainians. They didn't expect the Ukrainians to take them on. And if you notice, by the 20th day of the battlefield of the battle, the Russians just started using their heavy artillery, also started using their missiles to target specific places. But they still have been, I would say, fairly careful in attacking, the population centers. There have been some reports of Russians having killed a lot of people. There will be, after this war, a lot of investigation into who actually has killed them. Uh, you know, at the various places that we have come up with. Ukraine, of course, is accusing the Russians of human rights and war crimes. Well, if it is so, then they'll definitely face war crimes. But the important thing is that we're not very sure about what has happened. If you are aware that during a battle or during a war, truth is the first casualty of any war.
Absolutely. So only once the dust settles down and some time goes by, something will come up.
I would hold my judgment till I actually saw the investigation reports, and like everybody else, was extremely shocked about what all the dead bodies with the hands tied were found after Russian invasion. But importantly, Adi, the Russians, it's now 40 plus days. The Russians have again amassed forces towards the east. What are they actually looking to do is a question that maybe we should ask. Mr. Putin said that they were looking at the Sea of Azov and closing the gap between Crimea and Donetsk and Luhansk. That they've done. They've been able to sort of clear that place, and the Sea of Azov is not available to the Ukrainians anymore. Are the Russians planning to move up to the Dnieper River? That means wrap up eastern Ukraine and let Zelensky deal with western Ukraine to create a little buffer. So while we're unaware of the Russian mind, we'll have to keep seeing and keep studying this battle in greater detail.
A lot of people are saying so they're trying to strengthen up the east so that and just sit there after that, create a defensive line so that Ukraine will have to actually take the initiative to actually launch an attack of whatever kind they can to recapture the territory, and that's going to be a big challenge, obviously. So finally,
Adi, historically, I must historically, 100 odd years ago, in fact 60 years ago, just after the World War, or before the World War, uh, Western Ukraine was a part of Poland.
Yeah.
So there is a difference between the population of Western Ukraine and Eastern Ukraine. And that is why I think Mr. Putin is, planning this little bit of a distribution change, seeing what he feels is a gap in the thought process of Western and Eastern Ukraine. And at any rate, Crimea was something that Stalin gave Ukraine.
Yeah.
When Ukraine joined the USSR. So he just, what he feels is he's just sort of bringing these pieces back together, so that he is able to consolidate on the Russian-speaking population centers, get this there, create a buffer, as we spoke about, within Ukraine itself, and then force Ukraine to, he wants to change the constitution to become absolutely neutral, is what he's asked Zelensky to do. And the second issue of the Ukraine armed forces surrendering to it. So these are the issues that Mr. Putin is looking at. I'm not sure how much of it will be actually done. The NATO has proved that they cannot help, at least a country like Ukraine. Uh, Mr. Zelensky knows it now. How much more damage that will be done to Ukraine, we're not aware of before this war finally ends.
Absolutely. It's going to be a long time, I think, before we exactly know what's going to happen. So finally, drone warfare is not really out of the books because there are certain advantages, obviously. That's why this system is being propagated by pretty much all powers in the world, including India. There's been a couple of loitering drone tests that have been done day before yesterday, in Ladakh.
Loitering ammunition, yeah.
So there is some potential to this entire thing. What kind of a scenario do you think that potential can be brought to bear, and when are they effective?
See, Adi, we've had this loitering ammunition for a while now, the smart munitions. We've had this for a while on the battlefield. Uh, you fire a missile, you can call it a drone or you call it a missile, which has the ability to loiter in the sky, select the target, and hit the target in what it calls a suicide attack. This kind of ammunition is not something new. It's been there for about a decade now on the battlefield. What we've tested is a similar structure. The ability of smart munitions to target a single armor at the point at which he's extremely vulnerable, the top attack. The armor is most vulnerable from the top, and if you hit it from the top, then that's the place from where you can get a direct kill. In a multi-layered environment, air defense environment, whether we have the ability to shoot down these loitering ammunition or loitering smart munitions is a separate issue. But like I said, the Israelis have developed the Iron Dome for the Merkava tank, which has the ability to take on a 360-degree threat from any direction. So this kind of equipment works against people who don't have that kind of capability. It worked against Syria, it works against Armenia, but in the subcontinent or even in Asia with China and Pakistan, all the three countries, India, China, and Pakistan, have multi-layered air defense systems. Whether we have enough of them to defend the battlefield, the tactical battlefield, is something I'm not very sure. So there will be parts of the tactical battlefield that will be vulnerable still to smart munitions or to the kind of loitering ammunition attacks. But we would definitely have the ability to protect our vital areas, our vital points, and to defend our population centers. So it's a difficult thing to to sort of just wish it away. And definitely the strike forces will be vulnerable in on the tactical battle.
What I learned from you is that it can become a potent weapon if the user actually uses it in a scenario where it will give the result that he desires. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
not blind firing and hoping for a result may not really give you the result that you're wanting. And that's something
Yes.
I think you've brought out very, very clearly. And which is the cloudy part of drone warfare is that it is now being spoken about as a replacement of manned machines and this and that and the other.
No,
But there are huge
not as yet.
Yes.
Robocop is far away. not as yet. The Robocop is far away from any kind of such scenario at the present moment.
And that's I think the bottom line of our discussion, sir. And thank you so much for explaining that in a way that I think everybody will understand. Because the propaganda is all about that drone aa gaya, but now the game is done. And the understanding of these tactical maneuvers within the battlefield is kind of not there. You were mentioning that article that you had shared with me as well. They talk about huge amount of losses to the Ukrainian drones as well. And we've seen photographs of this drone being shot out of the sky and put across by the Russians and the Ukrainians themselves. So
that's right.
There's a lot of evidence which is here. Sir, thank you so much. I think, as always, it's a very, very clear and cut discussion with you. Bringing about a very, very interesting and very, very delicate topic with regards to technology, which a lot of us laymen may not understand at face value.
We don't probably understand. That's right. Thank you. Thank you
so much, sir. Bye. And till next time, from another subject, Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.